Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I'm John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. Good topic? Let's do it. What's the most frightening experience you've ever had? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. Whatever the antonym is for serendipitously, a good happenstance, ending in good feelings or happy outcome, found my mom about to stab my grandmother, her mom. My mom is schizophrenic. One day I had an urge to just get up and go downstairs. I don't even recall why, maybe to get a drink or something. And as soon as I got to the middle landing and saw into the dining room area my mom was sitting in, I paused because she just had this look on her face, and suddenly the hairs on the back of my neck went stiff. My mom abruptly stood up, and I watched her walk into the kitchen, and she pulled open a drawer, and my heart dropped when she pulled out a big chef's knife, and she suddenly lunged towards my grandmother, whose back was turned. She was cooking on the stove, and I screamed. This made my grandmother turn around and jump back, and my mom missed. How they played out like that, I don't know. I'm not religious, but I believe certain energies or vibes or whatever is out there definitely interferes with human lives sometimes. Some things are just not easily explained. The timing, the movement of things, the gut instinct you can't explain. My dad was home and heard me and rushed out, and long story short, my mom was restrained by both of us, and EMS and police arrived, and she stayed inpatient for weeks. My grandmother's okay, but never returned to visit after that. I was 16. I'm now 41. And my heart still races to this day when I look back on that memory. I'm not like ancient, but my parents had old-ass cars. When I was around 14, I was in my house, summertime, windows open, when I heard the unmistakable sound of a Dodge van being taken out of park. Clunk. My parents had just come home and left my 4-year-old brother in the car. The car was off, but you could take it out of park without the keys running. No e-brake engaged because that's safety. He had climbed into the driver's seat and was playing. I looked out the window and saw the van slowly shifting backwards toward about a 40-foot drop at the edge of our property. I ran as fast as I could, hopped the fence, hopped the second fence out of the yard, and jumped straight through the passenger window. Stuck it in park, but the van was moving too fast to engage the paw. So I bear hugged my brother and off we went. When the van landed, we both were slammed into the back window, which shattered. It hit a giant chestnut tree and flipped. If we had been ejected out of that window, it would have landed on us. I don't know, that's just something that popped into my head. I'm sure there's worse, haha. I was stabbed twice in the chest last year. The stabbing itself wasn't necessarily what frightened me. It is an unfortunate commonality in my line of work. What frightened me was watching my wife rushed into the emergency room crying and hysterical. Really forced things into perspective for me. I still work the same job. Bus doors closing on me with my mother on the other side as a child, and seeing her chase the bus down to get me out. It's not that my mother wasn't watching me. I just found a coin on the ground, and of course, me being a kid, I picked it up, and the dickhead bus driver was too impatient to wait for me to leave. It was literally a 6-second window between my mother getting off and the doors shutting. Thank goodness she made enough noise outside for him to stop and let me out. When I was about 10 years old, I had an appendectomy, but my appendix burst just as the doctor was pulling it out. So pus just leaked onto my guts. As well as the doctors cleaned or whatever, I still developed an infection and I almost died. I just remember my parents crying when the doctor was talking about the infection. Can't recall if it's sepsis or almost sepsis. Just awful ordeal, really. Years ago, I was at a mall and heard a woman scream from the upper level. I turned around and looked up and reflexively caught a toddler who had somehow managed to squeeze between the iron safety rails and fallen literally on top of me, a good 20 to 25 feet below. Perfect catch, not a scratch. I've replayed this in my head dozens of times, and still to this day, do not know how the hell I did this. Ex-girlfriend. It was the end of a 3-day festival where every single day she got shit-faced, belittled me in front of friends and family, and stressed me out consistently. The cherry on top is I paid for her ticket too. Last night, I just exploded. I tell her I'm breaking up and to get last. In hindsight, probably not the best idea, but I was over the whole situation. She started to make her way off the edge of a highway overpass. They had closed down for the festival. I was looking for our Uber at the time. Suddenly I hear screams. Some girls managed to get her off the edge. I freeze in horror. She starts hyperventilating, saying I hit her and broke up with her, etc. The girls start believing I physically hurt her. I try to explain, but as a sole female, they just butcher me with drunk screaming, threatening to call the cops on me. I finally manage to get us in the Uber. She instantly stops the crying act. I'm literally in shock. 1,000 yard stare, the whole 9 yards. I look out the window for the whole drive. I get out, get in the house, lock myself in the bathroom, and stare at the walls for 4 hours till morning, thinking, how will I manage to break up and make sure she's at her parents' place 300 kilometers away? Next morning, she pretends nothing happened. I manage to get us on a bus back home, pretending I want to go to this new venue, get to her parents' place, instantly break up, tell parents what happened, ask them to keep an eye on her for 24/7. She proceeded to be an absolute menace for several weeks after this. Every time I see a highway overpass, I get a panicked drop in my stomach feeling. She even managed to get her parents to hate me and spew shit about me all over town. Tried pitching my friends against me, told my parents I was suicidal. Effed me up for life, that one. The one that comes to mind is while backpacking through Central America. We were trying to get to an island called Utila in Honduras to take scuba lessons. The ferry to the island was cancelled due to turbulent water, so we were stranded in La Ceiba, at least overnight until the ferry was running. La Ceiba is not a safe city. High rates of violent crime. We got swarmed by men trying to take us in their cars. They apparently wanted business for their hostels, but they looked sketchy as F. We ended up being okay, but as a 24-year-old woman at the time, I was terrified. It was 2001. I was in the National Guard. We were on our 2-week training. It was Minnesota in July. I was a Cav Scout. Normally I took dismounted point, but there was a heat warning that day, so I just sat in the back of the M113 armored vehicle while we drove around. We left the rear crew hatch, small door, set in a bigger hinged ramp that formed the rear of the vehicle, open to get some airflow. At one point the driver plowed through a stand of young birch trees, breaking and knocking a few down. There were bigger trees further in though, and he tried to reverse out of it. I wasn't paying any attention until a 4-inch thick trunk with a point like a spear came straight into the open hatch. My track commander was standing at the front of the compartment, facing forward. The point was aimed right between his shoulders and underblades. An M113 is a very noisy vehicle, and he was wearing a helmet and a headset. I wanted to yell, but I was afraid he wouldn't hear me, or that he would freeze when he looked back, or there just wasn't time. So I jumped up and wrapped my arms around that tree and heaved the point up and over his right shoulder. It missed his cheek by a couple of inches. He snapped his head around and our eyes met. Holy shit, was all I could think of as he crouched and shouted for the driver to halt. Pull forward, halt, he snapped. Then, close the damn hatch. No one else saw this, and we never discussed it further. Honestly, the most frightening thing was my ex. At the end, we did a lot of useless fighting with words till one day she tried to block the door as I was trying to escape from a fight. That feeling of being trapped was something else. Also, one day we fought, and she went to the kitchen, grabbed a big-ass cooking knife, and held it high, pointed at my face while closing the distance between us. I swear to whatever you think is holy, I hate violence with a passion. But my instinct shaped and slapped her before I even started to understand the situation. That was truly frightening. I hope she's in a better state. At least I am. Resorting to violence, especially in a relationship, really at any point, is deeply concerning, if not troubling and murdery. Especially if you're grabbing a weapon like a knife. I'm glad you're okay, and I guess she's doing better. I hope you continue on that path. When my sister and I lived in Japan, we'd spend the weekend with friends at a ski resort, and as we got back to our pension to get ready to go back to our home prefectures, we saw one of the group members just sitting in the lobby. He said he'd fallen a few times and wasn't feeling well. He even got up to go throw up out of the back door. I immediately called our group organizer. This was 17 years ago, and up in the mountains of Nagano, so reception was spotty at best. And the guy kept getting worse. It turns out he'd not only fallen, but hit his head a couple of times, and he hadn't been wearing a helmet. We ended up going home without either of them. And for a while, we assumed he was going to die. His mother and sister came, and we had what we essentially thought would be his wake in Japan. In the end, he recovered enough to go home, and I think he's led a pretty normal life, but it was an incredibly scary situation. Psychosis. There would be periods where I blacked out, and when I came to, I found actions that pointed to suicidal intentions. But I wasn't really suicidal. I was giving away sentimental things. I was finding peace with people. I was irresponsible spending as if I had no responsibilities. And sometime after that fact, I found out that I had loaded my gun and put it back in the safe. I do not store it loaded ever, and no one else had access. I just blacked out, and when I came back, I had absolutely no recollection of any of it. When I began having flashbacks of the molestation I experienced as a child that I had suppressed all memory of for nearly 10 years. I was 6 when it happened, and 13 when they first started. I originally thought they were bad dreams, intrusive thoughts, something other than memories of real events. I started having panic attacks, nightmares, disassociation, and reactive behavior like someone with PTSD experiences when triggered. I think those memories resurfacing marked the beginning of the true downfall of my mental health. Before that, my mental health was poor, but I could still get through my day relatively okay. After I became severely depressed, my anxiety worsened to a severe degree, and I became severely agoraphobic and more suicidal than I'd ever been. It was so bad, I ended up dropping out of school and losing my teen years to mental illness. It was like my mental state plunged off of a cliff. I've never quite come back from it. I've got 2 that I'll never forget. Being on a minivan misadventure on an extremely unsafe mountain road in the Appalachians, with my wife driving and 3 kids in the car, several thousand feet up. Absolutely terrifying, absolutely unsafe. Wife had a legit panic attack at the top. And then worse was realizing we still had to drive back down. If I were an actor and wanted to channel fear, these are the moments I think of. One wrong tap on the gas, one slide too much while braking on gravel. All 5 of us would have plummeted to our deaths. Seeing another father panicking when he lost track of his young son in a cloudy river and was sure he had just been swept downstream and drowned. Probably the longest 90 seconds of my life, until he spotted him, having climbed out and played on the riverbank. Lesson: water safety is a serious thing.